Welcome and congratulations.
Hello, I'm Christine Webber and this is Tim Holder, and together we'd like to welcome you to Suffolk Community Foundation's Annual Review 2020, Rebuilding Local Lives Together.
Over the next 75 minutes, we'll be taking a whistle-stop tour across Suffolk, hearing about how business as usual has been maintained, how Team Suffolk has stepped up to the pandemic, and learning more about the challenges we need to overcome as we move forward to rebuild local lives. Let's give the first word of the evening to our chairman, George Vesti.
So George, it's become traditional over the last 15 years for the chairman to open the annual review event with a welcome and set the scene of the annual review. And I don't think any of us thought we'd be doing that virtually in a studio here today in the middle of a global pandemic.
No, it's quite a year to start out as chairman of the Suffolk Community Foundation, but it's great to be here, and it's really good to be able to welcome so many people from across the county, so many different sectors, to our virtual annual review this year. And the timing is perfect for the annual review because it gives us the opportunity to look back over the last 8 months of the pandemic, to take stock of what has happened, and to set the direction for future support on the part of the Suffolk Community Foundation for the voluntary sector in what is going to be a very, very tough 2021.
It certainly is, and we entered 2020 having had 3 elections in 4 years and just coming out of the edge of Brexit, and I don't think any of us thought that we would be walking just in the first 2 months of the year into this into this global situation.
Yeah, and there's no doubt that the crisis that we've experienced over the last 8 months has exacted an extremely heavy toll on many, many people across the county, over and above those who were already living in deprivation. For example, children and the loss of their opportunity to learn from education and to learn about life skills, older people suffering from isolation and loneliness, families confronted by uncertainty, dealing with bereavement, unemployment, the rapid growth of mental health issues. And we may not be the hardest hit county, but you've only got to look at the number of people through our charities that have been supported and the variety of different reasons for that support to understand the level of hardship that our charities in Suffolk have had to deal with.
And yet, we sit here as #Team Suffolk, and the spirit of the message that we're going to hear tonight from the voluntary sector is very much one of uplifting team spirit, innovation, creativity, and determination, and that has been very much reflected in the work of the foundation team this year as well.
Yeah, against a backdrop of absolute devastation to our charities. We've got about 5,000 charities in Suffolk. They've been confronted by the most incredible double whammy of unprecedented demand on their services at the same time that their revenues were being cut, their ability to raise funds, the reliance on support from their volunteers has been drastically reduced. And indeed, the highest burden has been felt most by the smallest charities that typically typify the voluntary sector in Suffolk. But notwithstanding all of that, the sense of resilience, can-do attitude of the voluntary sector and community groups throughout Suffolk has been quite extraordinary. If I look, my particular focus is obviously on the Suffolk Community Foundation, and I really have to pay tribute to the team for their resilience, their can-do spirit, their reinvention of how they deal with what we are being confronted by. Has been quite extraordinary, and it's absolutely fantastic that Stephen, the Chief Executive, has been awarded the MBE in the COVID National Honours, which I think is a great reflection on him. It's also a great reflection on what the team has done, both during this crisis, but actually over the 15 years since the inception of the Suffolk Community Foundation. While I'm on about the Suffolk Community Foundations, I must also thank the patrons and trustees for their fantastic support that they have provided us with.
And George, with the way things have been in your first year as chairman, you will have observed the pace of how everything has gone from the moment that lockdown hit in March and what's happened thereafter. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, if one can cast one's mind back to the sort of the bewilderment of this new world that we were living, and yet, within days, the Community Foundation had set up the Emergency Coronavirus Community Fund, and the response to that fund has been absolutely phenomenal, and in total raising 1.7 million to support the frontline needs of Suffolk. And the ability to identify where that need was helped and rapidly get grants through to the front line and to support the infrastructural needs of our charities to enable them to continue to function and to provide the support to so many in need has been extraordinary.
And so perhaps for people tuning in for the first time and not having been to an annual review, they might have perhaps thought that in a year like this, they might be coming to a very grey and dour event, analysing all of the great difficulties. But what we're actually going to see tonight is a Suffolk that is undefeated and has a real sense of optimism and a real sense of gratitude as well.
Yeah, showing the resilience that we've seen across Suffolk has been quite extraordinary. And the Suffolk Community Foundation itself, we're just a cog in the Suffolk wheel, and seeing Suffolk working together as never before. The reawakening of neighbourhoods, community groups, the volunteering that we've seen, the incredible partnerships with the likes of CAS, faith groups, Suffolk County Council, East and West Suffolk Councils, District Councils, SALC, clinical commissioning groups, Police and Crime Commissioner, it goes on and on. But these partnerships have been absolutely instrumental in providing the flexible solutions that were needed to deal with the immediate frontline needs. I must also mention the collaboration with the East Anglian Daily Times and the BBC Radio Suffolk, who have been extraordinarily powerful mouthpieces for rallying support across the county as well. And there is a debt of gratitude to the thousands of people who have contributed to the emergency appeal, and to our fund holders who have been stoic and steadfast from the very beginning, and never more so than in our hour of need over the last few months. We've seen Suffolk in many ways at its best.
And now, tonight also, the journey forward and what we're going to do to come out of this situation and rebuild local lives, and the launch of a very important report this evening.
Yes, our hidden needs reports have always guided where we have prioritised our focus for support across the county. And this is perfect timing to be launching our third hidden needs report. And I really look forward to hearing what Noel and Christian are going to have to say later on, because it will help to shine a light on the areas of deprivation across the county, many of which are deep-rooted, going way, way, way beyond the pandemic crisis that we're confronted now, and under-recognised for far too long. So it's going to really help us to focus on the priorities for support that we provide into the community for the years going forward. So I really look forward to hearing what they've got to say.
And George, on behalf of Suffolk and of Suffolk Community Foundation during this extraordinary year, we'd like to thank you for being an extraordinary chairman, and thanks for joining us today.
It's an absolute honour and a pleasure to be here.
When this special programme was being planned, the team at the foundation pledged to travel the county and to bring the voices of as many Suffolk people into the room as possible. Socially distanced, of course, with a camera crew in tow, the team set out to gather latest news from the work of charities on the ground and the incredible impact they're making on local lives. And perhaps most important of all, heartfelt thank yous from key figures in our county. This first film is all about compassion in crisis and older people.
Anyone can find themselves suddenly in crisis, and it's really important that there's help there quickly when they do. Suffolk's charities and community groups have come together to tackle some very specific issues such as bereavement, unemployment, sudden ill health, debt, homelessness, domestic abuse and addiction, and they've made a real difference.
In addition to supporting people to stay at home during lockdown, our community and voluntary groups across Suffolk are doing amazing work, starting on rebuilding people's lives locally and giving them stronger, brighter, better futures.
Hi, my name is Sam Porter. I am the Operations Manager at Lowestoft Food Bank. In April, we fed over 1,000 people. We are still feeding over 700 people a month, and we expect this number to only increase. I want to say a massive thank you to the Suffolk Community Foundation, to our local council, to many, many different organisations and businesses, and also for the general public that have kept on giving. So a massive, massive thank you.
Pink Orange is an amazing service that was used throughout the summer holidays of this year to provide essential food provisions for upwards of 5,000 families throughout Suffolk. It addressed more than the initial holiday hunger need. It has supported many families with additional problems that they face. So far, we've managed to deliver around 110,000 meals to those that need support in Suffolk, and we really, really do need to make this provision available long term. As part of the team that have delivered Pink Orange, I would like to thank each and every funder for their support. Without them, we would not have been able to positively enhance children's lives, households' lives in Suffolk this summer. Thank you.
Over the past year, many people in Suffolk have found their lives in crisis, but thanks to the work of Suffolk's voluntary sector, 39,065 direct beneficiaries have been supported.
A huge thank you to everyone in Suffolk who's come together to fight the virus and to help us now rebuild people's lives. Thank you.
Empowering our older people to live a fulfilling life is really important. And in Suffolk, we've got a growing population, but to make sure that we can support our older people, it's a really delicate balance to be created. When everyone works together, we can achieve some fantastic results.
Suffolk Foundation has worked with individuals, the public sector and local businesses to provide crucial financial support to a range of organisations, from charities, community groups and good neighbourhood schemes.
Our mission is to connect people in rural Suffolk to each other and to their communities, and to try and catalyse community activity that includes everybody. We immediately sent all our communities the suggestion of creating a phone tree because we wanted to make sure that people who are not tech savvy were included. We also then went online to create an inspirational page of creative ways to engage socially while physically distanced, and we turned our calendar into a diary of events that people could take part in. We took out flowers around our villages and just like random acts of kindness, we gave out flowers to people, and they were just so well received. People were so touched by that and uplifted by it. We also put our vehicles at the disposal of food banks, one in West Suffolk and one in Coastal, so that we could help collect food and then donate it, and also collect prescriptions and donate those as well. I would just like to say a huge thank you to everybody who has supported the Rebuilding Local Lives appeal, and to thank everyone through the Suffolk Foundation who has supported us through this really difficult time.
We have seen magnificent work from individuals, from our healthcare workers, from our schools, from our teachers, from the voluntary sector and from communities.
Over the past year in Suffolk, 12,101 direct beneficiaries have been supported within the older community.
Suffolk's been under immense pressure over the last 6 months, and this is a thank you from the Chamber and the business community to all those in the voluntary sector who have done so much to get Suffolk back on its feet. Thank you.
In addition to raising important funds for Suffolk, at the heart of the foundation is our commitment to local charities and community groups and the work they do to meet need in our county. We do this through grant making, and now we're going to hear from the person who, with her team, drives all of this process forward.
So Andrea, you're head of grant programmes at the foundation, and I've often heard it said that your team, you're like the engine room of the whole thing, and obviously you've been going hell for leather this year.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair summary. Thank you, Christine. Firstly, I would like to say thank you to the whole team. I mean, we've adapted and they've worked remotely very quickly. They've been supportive to the sector, and the relationships that we've got with both the groups, our funders, the openness, the honesty, the challenges that they're facing. It's been really, really encouraging. And yes, we've been working at full pelt, but it's also been quite enjoyable to see the outcomes of how things are changing and how people are working.
And in terms of all the sort of constraints on you and everything, how has your work evolved and grown during the period?
So I think we had a lot of systems in place already, which has made that we've been able to adapt very quickly. It's the demand. Demand is increasing and demand is changing daily. You know, what we needed at the very beginning was systems, IT, etc. But what we need now is completely different. It's more around the core costs and keeping those organisations sustainable.
Could you give me a for instance of, you know, because you're like an umbrella organisation, aren't you? Somebody that you've helped to adapt quickly to a very urgent need.
Yeah, probably the Citizens Advice is the easiest one to explain. So there's 6 Citizens Advice bureaus across Suffolk. Within the first 2 weeks of lockdown, we'd actually supported them to purchase new IT equipment to enable them all to work remotely. And of course, they lost a lot of volunteers, but demand increased, so this enabled them to really adapt very, very quickly.
And without your help, presumably it would have taken them much longer to make those changes.
I think so, yes. You know, it's great because it's meant that they can go forward into the second lockdown as well, and they can carry on working.
Now, I don't know if everybody watching us today is aware that Suffolk Community Foundation is part of a much bigger network, that there are lots of other community foundations around the country. How many are there, and what impact do you have on each other?
So there's 46 community foundations around the country. Because we are national but local, it's meant that we're trusted, respected, and it's enabled us to draw money down from the National Emergencies Trust to bring that into Suffolk. So we've increased the funding that we've had available to actually help the sector in Suffolk, as well as all the local fundraising that has obviously happened as well.
And in terms of the future, I mean, I don't know if you predicted lockdown 2, but we're certainly having it, and you know, and a lot of uncertainty going forward. But how are you planning for something that is so uncertain?
Well, demand is going to increase and it's going to change, as I've said. I think really important that we keep up the communication with our groups, that we're here, we're ready to listen, we're ready to help, but also with our donors, the partnerships with the public sector, all of our funders, many of them have been really adaptable, I guess is the word, in that they've given us money, they've diversified their giving, but we've also had new people come forward, people that we hadn't heard of before that have really wanted to help Suffolk. So I think we want to keep the COVID funding going, we want to do business as usual, we really want to improve the outcomes for those people that live in Suffolk.
Well, it sounds very much as if the emphasis is on community.
Absolutely, definitely.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you.
When the nights close in and temperatures drop in Suffolk, vulnerable people in our communities face a whole new set of challenges to stay warm, stay well, and stay connected. You may already have come across, or perhaps even donated to, the Foundation's annual Surviving Winter Appeal. But this will be no ordinary winter. So let's hear now about the impressive partnership of Suffolk organisations that have come together to ramp up efforts to support more people than ever this winter.
I'm Brad Jones, I'm editor of the East Anglian Daily Times, and I've seen the Surviving Winter Appeal from its start 9 years ago. And it's a really simple idea, but really effective. What it asks is that the winter fuel payment, which is non-means tested, people receive it whether they need it or not. If they can, they donate it to the Surviving Winter Appeal, and it goes to somebody who really needs it.
I'm Tim Holder, and for the last 6 years I've been leading the Surviving Winter Appeal each winter. During that time I've had a huge privilege of meeting many of the people who have benefited from this appeal, and I've found that really they are by far the best people to tell their story.
We were struggling really to keep warm, really. I've got a bad heart and they did tell me that I've got to keep warm. That's hard.
Yes, it is hard.
You don't know what to go without to pay the other bills.
It's left me in the point where I've just got an open fire, but if I go and have my shower, I've got no heating in the bathroom. You know, every time you go to the bathroom, it's freezing cold, and I mean it is cold. When we had that frost, it's really cold.
Generally feeling bad, particularly things like fingers and toes, joints. If they get very cold, they do not do their job as well as they should.
It was a misery. Last winter I was miserable. I was cold and miserable.
Over the last 9 years, the Surviving Winter Appeal has raised around £900,000 and heated thousands of homes in Suffolk. But also in recent years, it's started to reach people in other ways and help people in other ways too.
This appeal makes all the difference to people across Suffolk. We help older people and vulnerable people access funds to heat their homes in the colder times. We also help people with additional issues such as access to benefits, reducing fuel bills, help with debt and other aspects together with connectedness across the county. That's what makes this appeal and this project such a valuable thing for Suffolk.
What we've seen is the Surviving Winter Appeal has really influenced lots of other organisations, and they've jumped on board, got involved, and really we've seen Team Suffolk at its best here.
Surviving Winter enables us to identify some of these hard to reach people. Citizens Advice Bureau have been great at referring people who've come for a £200 winter fuel payment, but actually in the course of the conversation with the advisors, it's turned out that actually they need it because they're relying on plug-in portable electric heaters to heat their home. And that's where Warm Homes Healthy People comes in. We can actually send surveyors out to people in their home. We check their loft insulation, whether they've got wall insulation, we look at their heating systems, and we talk to them about any other problems that they have.
This winter, the Rebuilding Local Lives Surviving Winter Appeal will need to support more people than ever before. We are hoping to raise a total of £300,000, and due to the collapse of Age UK and many hundreds of people that benefited from their befriending scheme, we'll be extending the appeal to support voluntary sector organisations across the county to reach out to vulnerable, isolated people during the winter months. This year we're asking Team Suffolk to really help us spread the word. not only to people who need our support, but also vitally to increase the number of people that give so generously to this wonderful appeal.
The media has got a really crucial role in all of this. The work is fantastic, but it's getting the message out to those people that really need to hear it. They may not have internet access, they may not have a computer, they may not know about the appeal unless they hear about it on the radio, they see it in the local newspaper, the East Anglian Daily Times, and of course social media is also important because children, relatives of those people in need may well see it there as well. And I love the term Team Suffolk. When we all come together and help out, we can make a real difference.
One of the most important things for Suffolk when it comes to tackling the future challenges is that organisations work together. Surviving Winter is a really great example of how that has worked successfully in the past, but on a small scale. We're going to need a lot more of that in the future. The coronavirus pandemic is going to lead to more hardship, sadly. But if we can work together in Suffolk, Team Suffolk will make a massive difference. So if you're able to get behind these initiatives, please do. Any help would be greatly appreciated.
Let's leave the final word this year to the incredible people that benefit from the Surviving Winter appeal.
I would just say, please think about that money that is given to you by the government, that other people also get, but that isn't enough to pay their bills with.
If at all possible, give to be able to assist someone who is less well off than yourself.
If you are in a position that a lot of old age pensioners are these days, with good pensions, and you receive a winter fuel allowance from the government, you don't really need it. And therefore, why don't you give it to somebody who does need it?
So please support Surviving Winter appeal.
It's so easy to support the Winter Appeal. You can visit our website, donate online or by telephone, or by visiting any branch of Ipswich Building Society. And every penny you can give will quickly make a difference to somebody else in need in Suffolk. And now we turn the spotlight to Suffolk Community Foundation's Chief Executive and my boss, Stephen Singleton, MBE.
So, Stephen, a really exceptionally odd year, but also an exceptionally busy year for you.
It was a very busy year up until March, Christine, and then thereon it was an extremely busy year, and it has been an extremely busy year. Yep. So what happened in March was the lockdown happened. We went into emergency mode, and community foundations are good at emergency mode. We are ready for that. So by day 2 we were operational, and the challenge was to raise more money for the emergency. And we nearly raised £2 million.
It's fantastic.
Which means that on top of the day-to-day business, that's just shy of £5 million for the last year's figures. And we distributed that in 885 grants, I think, which is extraordinary. So that's an awful lot of work and processing that's going on.
So huge challenges, but you've more than met them. I mean, fantastic result. Are there any positive ways, do you think, of working that have developed through this that you think, yeah, that'll be very good in the new normal? I think most of us want to believe, don't we, that some good will come out of this in one way and another. Can you see things you could point to?
I think the obvious one that everyone's pointing to is video conferencing. So we're all Skyping and Teaming and all the other things we do. And I think that's here to stay, and it's made us more focused, I think, in some of those meetings, and it's a cost saving, huge cost saving. But I think the biggest thing for the foundation is partnership working. That has really accelerated. We've always worked with public sector and in partnership with the voluntary sector, and to some degree with the private sector as well. But that has gone to a strategic level now, and that is amazing because we stop replication, we can align our activities to meet the demands that are happening. And that's probably going to be a huge legacy.
So you're sort of streamlining in a kind of way, aren't you? Cutting out the travel, cutting out the overlaps.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
and we've all been working from home. We were ready for that. And in a way that's become, we're certainly more productive, because that's not necessarily a good thing because we miss each other, but you are working when you're working, and
Sure.
there's no distraction, less distraction.
No.
So it's been quite an exhilarating time that none of us are going to forget.
I'm sure that's true. What are the challenges going forward then?
The challenges going forward are actually, it's relatively simple to understand. For the voluntary sector at large, the challenges going forward is firstly a huge increase in demand. And that's going to stay because there is a recession on the heels of all of this following. So dealing with that demand, that surge in demand, has been absolutely challenging for the voluntary sector and for public sector services and everyone, our hospitals and so on. But where it's kind of amplified with the voluntary sector, at the same time, because of social distancing in the main, we've had a reduction in fundraising activity. So charity shops have closed and all sorts of marathons have been cancelled. And that is providing a shortfall in funding, which nationally, according to one of the organisations that looks at the voluntary sector, is they're anticipating a £10 billion shortfall in funding nationally. So in Suffolk, you could probably say that's between 10 and 20 million pounds. And also what's happened, of course, social distancing has restricted the activities of the way services are delivered,
of course,
and particularly the use of volunteers, many who are at the older end of the scale and particularly vulnerable. So it's a perfect storm that's happened. What is really amazing is the creativity that the voluntary sector has. It is such a creative sector, it's so inspiring, and it's managed to rise to the challenge and is meeting the demand.
Quite obviously, it really is. Now, I'd like you to imagine for a moment that I'm your fairy godmother.
Yeah.
And I can grant you one wish for the foundation. What would that be?
You've granted it. No, that aside. No, one wish. Could I have two wishes?
You can have two. I'm feeling very generous.
So one wish is we have a huge funding shortfall for Suffolk to keep these services going. We know the services are going to be more and more needed over the next year. So my one wish is that people who are in a position to give to charities and enjoy doing that, think locally. And if they don't know where to put the money locally, come to the foundation. And my second wish is that the opportunities that have arisen through partnership working, I hope that isn't forgotten, and we use that as a platform to carry on building those services and those relationships and the delivery of solutions for the most vulnerable people in communities going forward.
Sounds very positive. Stephen, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And let's hope Stephen's wishes come true. I'm sure that we'll all do everything in our power to ensure that they do. And now let's take a trip back out into Suffolk for the second in our trilogy of Suffolk stories.
Our shared aim is to create positive environments where young people can thrive and develop to meet their full potential and be the best that they can be. We especially want to create positive outcomes for children with disabilities, poor mental health, or facing other challenges and difficulties in their life. During the pandemic, Suffolk Community Foundation have worked with key partners like us here at Community Action Suffolk to support charities and community organisations to move their work forward and flex accordingly.
There are so many fabulous charities and community groups in Suffolk delivering early intervention projects, encouraging the skills that are required to become a great parent and supporting positive family environments where our young people can really thrive.
So when the news came through that the schools were closing and we were going to be locked down, my main concern was how on earth were we going to still maintain contact with our children and young people. Overnight mentoring and counselling went online, video calls, Skype. Our open access sessions reverted to WhatsApp group chats and virtual sessions. and our contact with families increased because we were delivering free school meals and work packs to children, young people and families in Felixstowe. So a massive, massive thank you from all of us at Level 2 to everyone who's supported us, from the children and families that have engaged with us, the partner organisations that we've worked with, those really strong relationships that we've made. Thank you.
A focus on the well-being of children and families is always a priority for Suffolk Community Foundation, and in partnership with the voluntary sector over the past year we have reached an amazing 44,582 direct beneficiaries.
So on behalf of us all, a really big thank you for all that you do for the residents of Suffolk.
Suffolk is a fantastic county, many of us know that, and we all want to have really thriving and very safe communities. The voluntary sector and the charitable sector have risen to the challenge to really help bring people together, to reinforce that very powerful sense of community that we are very fortunate to have here in Suffolk.
Building a stronger and resilient community means that when issues arise, people naturally come together to help to support each other. These are just a few of the projects that achieve this, supported by the Suffolk Community Foundation.
My name is Fanu Mtumburi. I'm the director here at the Ipswich and Suffolk Council for Racial Equality in Ipswich. My fear in March when the lockdown hit us was the huge concern that, particularly people from BME communities were going to lose a lot of the services that they relied upon for support. We were worried about people who were exposed to COVID-19 because they worked in frontline services and where they would get support. We were concerned about people who had English as a second language because they didn't understand some of the guidance that was being provided. One of the things that really pleased us was the way that our communities came together in response to this pandemic. We were looking out for each other. People were looking at what services they could provide that other groups couldn't, but also what they could benefit from others. A huge thank you to Team Suffolk for pulling together in the way that we have done. There's amazing things that we have done during this pandemic, and we need to continue doing the same. We need to continue pulling together and supporting our communities. We can achieve this, and thank you to everybody who has worked so hard to achieve all the positive difference for our communities.
I'm Bryony, I'm the IP17 GNS coordinator, set up in March to help people in our local community get through the lockdown period.
I'm Terry Barrow, I deal with the food deliveries and volunteer drivers. Once we receive a call come in from a person who requires food delivery and they're frightened to go out or they're scared to come out, at least we can reassure them by delivering food, have a volunteer driver do it for them, or a click and collect in fact from the local supermarket. Our drivers who deliver food are also looking out for these people at home. They might be on their own and making sure they're safe, secure, and we can always supply a buddy to call them at any time we want.
Initially we thought it was going to be the old people that struggled most throughout lockdown, but very quickly we realised it was the young people who were suffering most. With schools and all their clubs and activities closed down, they had very little to do. In response to this, we've started up family rounders, line dancing, yoga, and have many other activities planned for the future.
And one of the things that is fantastic about Suffolk is the way we are able to come together, working across all sectors and particularly with the voluntary sector.
In partnership with Suffolk Community Foundation, the voluntary sector have supported 28,006 direct beneficiaries to support thriving and safe communities.
Wow, what a sector. Here at Team South, we want to say thank you to all town and parish councils and the communities and organisations that they work with. You are all amazing. Thank you.
So far today, we've heard much about the achievements of the last year and Suffolk's response to the emergency before us. But now, let's take a moment to both learn from the past and look to the future as we launch a brand new Suffolk Hidden Needs report from our very own university. First, we return to the man who created the concept of hidden needs, Stephen Singleton, and then we hear from the academics who prepared the report.
So Stephen, this is the third in the Foundation's Hidden Needs series. Can you tell me a little bit about it?
Yep. Hidden Needs was developed to guide the Foundation's grant making and to make a case for philanthropy. And it's an in-depth research of deprivation levels across Suffolk. So this is the third one over a period of a decade, and it's based on data from 2007 to date.
Okay, so how is this one different from the previous report?
This is very different. It's looking at the same areas, but what's happening this time is we're looking at the data over a time period. And that's given us patterns and trends of how deprivation is changing. And most importantly, is putting a spotlight on the drivers of deprivation. So that's radically different to the past from just reporting the deprivation level at one point in time.
So what has this different approach to hidden needs actually revealed to you?
It's revealed, there are a couple of things it's really revealing. One is that there is a long-term trend in Suffolk that is slowly slipping us down the ranking. And the second spotlight has really fallen on the resilience of Suffolk to recover from a recession. Now that's particularly poignant, bearing in mind where we are at the moment. So that's the major findings. Of course, it goes into the detail, which we'll discuss later on in the review.
So I'm joined now by Dr. Noel Smith, independent researcher and consultant, Dr. Christian Dagaru, Associate Professor from the University of Suffolk, and Michael Atwood, Head of Partnerships at the Suffolk Community Foundation. So Michael, let's start with you then. Can you tell me a little bit about why Suffolk Community Foundation has commissioned this research?
Sure. So our first Hidden Needs report was published in 2011, and we had a follow-up second edition that followed that. And both of those reports really showcase the breadth and the distribution of deprivation and need across the county. And we're really aware that need and deprivation isn't static, there's a fluidity to it. So we were really keen to look at what the numbers were telling us 5 years later. Of course, we know that Suffolk is generally a prosperous county, but we do know from our previous reports that there are specific pockets and concentrations of deprivation across certain areas of Suffolk. So being clearer about where that deprivation lies across the county is really vital in enabling the voluntary and community sector and others to address that need.
And how has the research been put together?
So our research partners at the University of Suffolk, and with also Dr. Noel Smith, an independent consultant, has utilised an array of different national data sets. In particular, they've used the Index of Multiple Deprivation, which is a comprehensive suite of 7 different areas of deprivation. And the Index of Multiple Deprivation looks at deprivation at a very local level. So it enables us to see the pattern of distribution across the county, but also pick out those areas of hidden need that may lie among more affluent areas of the county.
Okay, and what about the different approach to this version of Hidden Needs?
Sure, so I think Stephen possibly touched upon the fact that we were doing things slightly differently this time around, and the previous Hidden Needs were very much snapshots of a particular point in history. And what we've tried to do this time around is to look at what the data is currently telling us, but also how that has changed since the first and the second iterations of the report. And what's immediately clear is that Suffolk is becoming relatively more deprived, and that deprivation is beginning to manifest itself in different areas and in different forms across the county. So taking the long view really also enables us to analyse the impact of economic changes. So for example, the 2008 recession, we were able to see the impact of deprivation that followed from that. And we very much hope that we would be able to utilise our new report at a time when it's quite likely that due to COVID-19 there may be a future recession, that we'd be able to look at past trends to try and predict what the future might look like.
Yeah, I can see that could be very useful. So, Noel, how would you sum up how deprivation has been changing in Suffolk?
Well, as Michael said, there's been 2 dynamics. Deprivation in Suffolk is changed in 2 ways. And I've got a picture here that is quite helpful in illustrating this. So what these tables show is they show the spread of Suffolk neighbourhoods in relation to deprivation. On the left-hand side, in the dark blue, are the proportion of neighbourhoods that fall amongst the most deprived deciles or categories. And on the right-hand side, in the light blue, are the proportion of neighbourhoods which fall into the least deprived categories. And this shows us two things. First of all, it shows us that the proportion of neighbourhoods in the most deprived category has increased between 2007 and 2019. So in the number one, the first decile, most deprived decile, there's been an increase from 3.6% to 5%. And if we just go a little bit up to the second most deprived decile, we can see a shift from about 4% to over 6%. So that's one thing. The other thing that it shows is that if you look in 2007, there's a concentration of neighbourhoods around the 7th and 8th decile, so towards the less deprived end. But in 2019, that concentration has sort of slumped down to the 5th and 6th decile. Now, this doesn't mean that suddenly there's lots of neighbourhoods that have become deprived, but what it means is that there's been an increase in the proportion of households in those neighbourhoods which are experiencing deprivation.
Can I just clarify something, that deprivation isn't exactly the same thing as poverty, is it?
No, no, that's right. And the government's measure of deprivation includes a number of things. It includes education, housing, health, a number of things. But certainly income is a really important part of that picture. When in the IMD talks about income, it talks about income deprivation, and it measures this in a couple of ways. The proportion of households on low income, low pay, and the proportion of households dependent on out-of-work benefits. Now, Suffolk experiences less income deprivation than England, but it still means that there are 75,000 people in Suffolk in income deprivation.
75,000 is a lot.
It is. It's still a significant number. Compared to the rest of England, the proportion of older people in income deprivation has been decreasing over time. But that still means there are 22,000 older people in Suffolk in income deprivation. And income deprivation affects children. And it's concerning that there are 18,000 children in Suffolk who experience income deprivation.
I mean, that to me is a shocking and staggering figure. And I suppose a lot of people this year have become much more aware, haven't they, of poverty in childhood. I think because of the news about the pandemic and everything. I mean, but 18,000 children in Suffolk alone, that seems astronomical, really.
It is certainly an issue of concern. That represents 13% of all the children in the county.
Mm. Well, certainly you're painting a slightly different picture from the kind of the pink cottage sort of Suffolk that we tend to kind of have it in our mind. Because I think most people do think of Suffolk as being somewhere where pretty well, loads of people anyway are well-off people.
Yeah, and certainly lots of people are. There are lots of neighbourhoods, lots of households in Suffolk who are affluent and advantaged, but clearly what the IMD is showing us is that's not the case for everyone. And when it comes to income, the issue in Suffolk is less about unemployment. Suffolk generally tends to have a low level of unemployment, and it's more to do with low pay. So, and I've got a graph here that shows this quite powerfully, if I may. So what this graph shows is average weekly wages since 2008. And you can see here that it compares England, which is in the red line, and Suffolk, which is represented there by the blue line. And simply, at a glance, this shows that there's been a long-standing pattern of lower average wages in Suffolk compared with England. And what does that mean? Well, in 2019, average weekly pay in Suffolk was £37 a week, less than for England.
£37 a week, so you multiply that by 52, you know, people are a long way behind a lot of the rest of England then, aren't they?
And indeed, but that's a figure for Suffolk overall, and there are places within Suffolk where average pay is relatively less. So in Waveney, in East Suffolk, for example, in 2007, average weekly pay was £151 a week, less than the average for England. And, you know, and of course, pay affects everything. It has an impact on everything. Housing affordability, fuel poverty, travelling to work, travelling to school. So
really people are putting in, you know, long hours working, but they still probably are finding it hard to feed their families. I mean, £151 a week less, well off. It's quite extraordinary figure, isn't it?
Indeed.
Christian, may I come to you at this point? So, obviously then, deprivation isn't just about low income, but other things too, but obviously income is a major part of it. But do you want to expand on that?
It is a major part indeed, but there are other factors as well. I can give you an example of health, because again, Suffolk is perceived as a rather healthy place to be, but even for health, we have seen a pattern of increasing deprivation,
Yeah.
So more neighborhoods, for example, are moving toward the lower end, the more deprived neighborhoods across England, and there are fewer in the less deprived across this period. And I think here is, and this is true in places like, especially true in places like East Suffolk or Ipswich. I think here it's also worth mentioning or reminding that these indicators are a measure of a relative deprivation. So, because it's based off ranking across the entire England. So when we say that a neighborhood became more deprived, or it moved to the more deprived end, it doesn't always mean it became more deprived in absolute terms, although it can be the case. But it definitely means it's falling behind the rest of England. So maybe England is improving a bit at a faster pace, but those places still stay behind.
So, have these changes in health had a big impact overall on deprivation in Suffolk then?
Yes, health has an impact on overall deprivation in Suffolk, but there are other indicators that have maybe a stronger impact, and one of them is education. Suffolk has a consistent, significant more issues with education or education-related deprivation. For example, in the IMD 2015 data from the IMD 2015, over 18% of Suffolk's neighborhoods fell within the 10% most deprived across England, and that's significant. That decreased a bit, so now in the latest IMD 2019 is about a bit over 14%, but still is higher than you would expect. And you can look at other things related to education. For example, disadvantaged children in Suffolk are doing less well than disadvantaged children in England generally. You can look, for example, at attainment level of children who are eligible for free meals, and the attainment level of those in Suffolk are worse than in the rest of England.
Why would that be, do you think?
I think it's part of the entire. I think they're all linked.
Yes.
If you think income, if you think other forms of deprivation, so it's important to get kind of this composite picture to it.
It's certainly illuminating for us what has been a hidden picture. Then I think, isn't it?
It is, really? Yes. Another thing about Suffolk, for example, is progression to higher education. A smaller proportion of young people in Suffolk progress to higher education compared with the rest of England. So it's kind of across the board.
Yes, Yes. Noel, so this is quite hard to take all this in, actually. When you're talking about these other forms of deprivation, you're not necessarily talking about them just in terms of the more disadvantaged communities in the county, are you?
Not necessarily so, no. And so education is a good example of that. Deprivation related to education affects neighbourhoods across Suffolk, rural and urban, and as Christian's saying, it's a long-standing issue in the county. And actually much the same can be said about housing. Our findings suggest that Suffolk ranked more poorly for housing quality than England, and that's certainly been the case since around 2015. And one of the main measures of housing quality in the IMD is around heating and around maintaining the thermal comfort of a home. And it's true to say that older rural properties tend to be harder to heat and more expensive to heat than houses in town. And we could see that. So in 2019, 25% of all rural neighbourhoods in Suffolk were in the most deprived decile for housing conditions. And really that's something that represents a distinct hidden need in Suffolk, because it means that you can have relatively affluent, advantaged rural neighbourhoods, but within those neighbourhoods you can have families, households who are living in cold homes, spending a lot of money to heat those homes and putting themselves at risk of poverty, of fuel poverty, and potentially even risking health.
And indeed going to have to pay a much higher proportion of their income, such as it is, on heating, and that's money that can't be spent on other things.
No, that's right. And that's around heating, around housing quality. But there's another issue which is around housing affordability and house prices. And this has been a slowly, gradually growing source of pressure in Suffolk. So what we know is that house prices overall have been generally increasing faster in Suffolk than they have in England. But that's especially the case for more affordable, cheaper housing. It's technically referred to as lower quartile housing.
Okay.
And so between 2007 and 2019, there's been, for this type of housing, prices have increased by 39% in Suffolk, which is a lot more than the 28% increase for England generally. And we're seeing a similar finding for rented accommodation. And it all means that cheaper housing in Suffolk is relatively more expensive than cheaper housing in England generally. And I guess what we're seeing then is a case of increasing house prices being compounded by lower wages in the county.
Well, Michael, we began with you, I'm going to end with you. So much to think about. What does Suffolk Community Foundation plan to do with all this research?
Well, I think firstly, there's quite a lot of data, as you can see, and information and insight that we're going to need to take some time to absorb. However, I think once we've done that, we'll be using the report much the same as we have used previous. So we'll be using it especially to try and target some of our grant making towards the areas of need that have been identified, taking a more strategic approach to grant making. We'll very much be using it with our network of local philanthropists that we work with. So it's very important that people are able to understand the need in Suffolk, where it exists, how it manifests, so that particularly those that may want to support a specific issue or in a specific locality are able to do so. Additionally, we'll be using it a lot with our public sector partners. So we work with partner organisations across the public sector, We'll be very much hoping that some of this work can help to not just inform their own activity, but spearhead some strategic partnerships as well. So we can be able to use that data and try and contribute to a more joined up approach to tackling deprivation across the county. And just lastly, I think, as I mentioned briefly before, I think, with the COVID-19 pandemic and the likely economic impact that will bring, we know that there's a real chance that a recession will grow in size, and therefore deprivation may well become even more severe in the county. So we'll be looking at how the previous recession panned out in Suffolk and what was done to try and alleviate the needs that came from that, and we'll be trying it to see if we can learn from the past to make good in the future.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you to all three of you for shining a light really on things that were well hidden and now are more apparent, and now you can do more things about them.
Thank you.
So thank you very much, all three of you, and for your time and for your expertise. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we're delighted to tell you that Noel, Christian and Michael are making themselves available for further questions via 2 online Q&A sessions on the 20th of November at 10 a.m. and the 2nd of December at 2 p.m. You can submit questions in advance and register for these sessions on the Suffolk Community Foundation website. And now for the third and final film in the Suffolk Stories trilogy, we turn to the subjects of health and well-being and education, learning and skills.
Suffolk is a compassionate county. During the pandemic, communities have come together like never before, and our voluntary sector has been absolutely heroic in keeping people healthy, independent and safe.
We were considering how we could support all the people that we care about. We have over 80 people who come and work with us, and they were now being asked to stay at home, and many of them were staying in a single bedroom with no resources or activities outside. And we focused on what we could do for those 80 people, and we came up with the idea of boredom packs. People were sitting literally in one room with no resources, no books, no paper, no pen even to draw a picture or do that lovely rainbow that people were doing in their windows. So we started to distribute them to each person that we knew about in a clear plastic bag every 2 weeks to actually give them resources to use within their own home and stay home safely. Without the support of the Suffolk Foundation who funded it, we actually not only helped our 80 people, but we also worked with all the people that were housed through the Street Homeless initiative to get everybody in. So we had 40 people in the Great Western Hotel, we worked with every hostel, we were working with over 150 people. Your support through the COVID crisis and ongoing has made a huge difference to over 120 people in the local area. And not only have you made a tangible physical difference, but also emotionally you've proved to people that Suffolk cares about them. Thank you.
In Suffolk, over the past year, 73,300 direct beneficiaries have been supported with their health and well-being.
As the leader of the NHS in Suffolk, I wanted to pay tribute to the voluntary sector and thank them for their extraordinary efforts for the local population.
Equality and access to education is so important for so many people across Suffolk. The voluntary sector is brilliant at providing that particular service to communities where perhaps mainstream educational services are hard to access.
One of the big issues has been making sure that pupils at schools don't fall behind. Many households, disadvantaged, deprived households, had no access or very limited access to either IT equipment or the internet.
Okay, so Ipswich Community Media is a grassroots organisation. We work with a range of different people, young people that aren't in education, that are on the periphery of drugs and gangs, that are from broken homes, marginalised communities, LGBT young people, but also refugees and immigrants. I feel like we offer them a lifeline to become the person that they've always wanted to be. So if they want to learn English so they can apply for a job, we'll support them on that whole journey. So we had to quickly, we reached out to you guys and anyone that could help resource people at home so so they can continue being supported by us. It's been really nice to see people join forces and support each other because they feel supported by us. The impact that we've made over the last 6 months and beyond has been incredible. Our aim is to change lives and to make wholesome individuals. I want to say a big thank you to the funders. Without your support, we couldn't provide the services and resources available to our learners and our beneficiaries. We've been able to continue our work virtually, as well as doing more check-ins and more outreach work with our community.
So at Access, the last 6 months have been outstanding in terms of what we've been able to achieve in response to the needs in our communities around COVID. It's not been difficult, but it has been different, and that has been the biggest challenge for us. So having to deliver services to a much more needy audience, but deliver it remotely, for example. So we have increased our service delivery. The funding has not increased, but our delivery outcomes have increased, which has meant we've had to be more creative, which for Access is always a brilliant opportunity, but we do now need funding going forward. My biggest concern is that we haven't seen the biggest issues hit our communities. That's going to be in the next 6 months, and that's when we really need support around additional funding.
Especially during lockdown, education has been disrupted, and yet the voluntary sector here in Suffolk have supported 5,592 direct beneficiaries.
So over the time that we've been working with the Suffolk Community Foundation for the Rebuilding Local Lives appeal, I've spoken to over 40 charities on my breakfast show. And what really impresses me is the way that they've had to adapt to a very difficult time. They're robust, they're doing things differently, they're reaching out to people that they would have physically met before on Zoom meetings, they're making phone calls, they're really innovative, you know, and I'm proud of the work that our voluntary sector has done here in Suffolk, because without them, we really would have had an even tougher time than we've had. So power to their elbow, and well done to everybody concerned.
Now, you may have noticed during the programme today that we've gradually been totalling up the number of direct beneficiaries that have been reached through partnerships with Suffolk Community Foundation and our fabulous charities and community groups here in Suffolk. But for those of you who haven't been sitting there with a calculator in your hand, now is the time to announce the total number that has been achieved for this year. And the total is 205,646 direct beneficiaries.
That is absolutely mind-blowing. Congratulations to everybody in Suffolk for that magnificent effort.
Yeah, well done everyone.
But now it's really important to focus on the future, and to do that we return to the chairman of Suffolk Community Foundation, George Vestley.
The films that we've seen show just what a caring county Suffolk is. We are brilliant at supporting those in need, whether it's volunteering, looking out for our neighbours, giving generously to Suffolk's Rebuilding Local Lives appeal. When we collaborate, we really can achieve great things. The crisis shows the power of Suffolk working together in partnership. So my first appeal is to the leaders across the county, whether it's the Suffolk County Council, East and West Suffolk Councils, district councils, leaders in health and social care, education, protecting the communities, whether it's voluntary sector players in Haverhill or up in Lowestoft, business leaders looking to give back to their community. We must continue to work together for the common good, avoiding any return to silos, building the strong partnerships to support those in need across Suffolk. The pandemic is far from over. We know we are going to see continued adverse effects on the economy, impacting communities, families, and individuals. The Hidden Needs Report highlights the long-term issues that we must now confront. We have brilliant charities and community groups that make up our voluntary sector. They need our help as never before, so my second appeal is to everyone across the county. Individuals, families, businesses, past donors, potential donors, public sector organisations, please help in whatever way you can to enable Suffolk Community Foundation to deliver more support, starting with our winter appeal. We're now going to hear directly from two young people who've benefited from receiving in-depth support from projects created by Ipswich Community Media. And then we'll finish with a piece on Brian, a gentleman recovering from a serious illness in total isolation in his upstairs flat since March. All these examples show what a huge difference our support really can make. Thank you.
This year's been one of the toughest years of my life, I'd say. So it started off with my dad's dad passing away, literally like the day we went into lockdown. My parents were struggling with their relationship, and then they've separated now, so then we had to move. Then my mum's dad passed away. Well, I got quite down, and obviously we're not allowed to leave the house properly, but like I wasn't doing anything. I wasn't talking to people, I wasn't doing music, I wasn't doing anything. I was really kind of just shut down. It's had a toll on depression and stuff like that. I was a broken little piece of mess when I found out about this group for the first time. It literally, I remember coming home and telling my mum, I now have a reason to live for now. It definitely keeps you on the right track, stops you from listening to yourself when you're thinking really negative things. And also, I don't know, it's something to look forward to, because you're not the only person that needs to keep you feeling good. You know that there's people that, as much as it feels like you are the only person in your house, in your bubble, you know that there's other people at the end of the phone who are like spurring you on, who are like thinking about you in the time that you're not there together, who are like on your side, basically. Maybe things can be good in the future, because there's like 20 people telling me that I can do it, so I literally cannot describe how much it has made an effect on my life. I probably wouldn't be here right now if it wasn't for this group. Thank you for being there, being the people that has made all of this possible, basically.
I was introduced to IHAG because I was being threatened with homelessness. I was a professional healthcare worker for over 25 years. Became poorly, and within a matter of 16 months, I'd lost everything. And yeah, that was a hard pill to swallow, but it just goes to prove it can happen to anyone. I mean, IHAG is a stepping stone into independence, but it's a huge stepping stone, and it's a very, it's a big safety net for a lot of people. It was for me, because I was very, very depressed. I was anxious, I was scared. The thought of actually sleeping on the streets absolutely terrified me.
Personally, just like struggles with like the way they teach at like school, and like the way the way it was all structured, I couldn't deal with it. I felt claustrophobic in the classes, and at home, my home life was getting quite like down because of like school and like how it was tiring me and stuff, and it just kind of made me like feel all like kind of alone. Just not the best person to be around. It's not how I want my future to be. I don't want to be this angry kid that no one wants to be around, and I didn't like that. My thing's music and like art, like anything creative to do with arts and media and stuff, but mainly music. Coming here, it brings me happiness, just playing the piano, playing the guitar, making a song, composing music. Like mainly Jay, like who's in there now, my tutor, and like he's helped me through like personal issues, the studio, like obviously like teaching me different fundamentals to do with music. I'm now in college, I'm starting out, and it's crazy for me, like it's still like breathtaking the fact I'm in college, like studying a music course, thanks to studio, which they both come together, and it's just like, without everyone, I wouldn't be where I am now. So I'd like to say a huge thank you to Punch Studios for obviously helping me with my ambitions and like making them come to life and like boosting my confidence to a whole new level, heading to like a brighter future, achieving new things, and it's just like mind-blowing, and like mind-blowing for my mum, for me, for my friends. Like it's good. It's like, it makes me feel good about life.
We are the IP17 Good Neighbour Scheme in Saxmundham.
I've got your prescription, Brian. There you go. It's all right. See you again next week. So yeah, that's how it works. We get dinners and all sorts up there.
Well, that's about it. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, if you registered for this event, you will shortly receive an email containing a copy of our annual report, the brand new Hidden Needs report, and a link to watch this event again, which we hope you might share with other people who are going to find it interesting.
And of course, there are also helpful links for you to offer financial support for our work and feedback on today's event. And also, if you're now considering forming a closer partnership with Suffolk Community Foundation, you might like to watch a film called 3 Ordinary Suffolk Girls, which features 3 amazing women from Suffolk who have already done so.
So, goodbye for now. Stay warm, stay well, and please stay connected to Suffolk Community Foundation.
Bye-bye.